Welcome to Breaking Views. I'm Priyanshi Sharma and today we're going to discuss the Indian aviation industry. Well, it's been a historic day for Indian aviation today as Indigo has signed the biggest ever civil aviation deal in the history of civil aviation in the world, and that deal has been signed for 500 aircraft with Airbus. This is the biggest deal in civil aviation globally, and this is Indigo, the Indian airline, which holds more than 50%, more than half of India's market share in the aviation space. But what we're going to discuss today is that while this is a historic day for Indian aviation and while we celebrate this, there are several challenges that the Indian aviation industry faces, especially when it comes to us consumers. The prices, the airfares are rising up to exorbitant levels. We've seen that ever since the government removed the cap on airfares in September last year, in September 2022, the airfare caps that were put in place during the pandemic in 2020, ever since that cap was removed last year, prices have been climbing up. If we look at the popular routes and the prices across popular routes, they have gone up by around 50 to 60% as well in certain routes just in a matter of the last 10 months from September to now, and that has been an alarming rise. That has made, in fact, if I can put it that way, that has taken air tickets and air travel that has flown away from the common man's pocket. So that's one concern that we'll discuss. Why are Indian airfares rising so much and what's the solution? Another point to highlight here is that the government has been saying that there are external factors at play, and surely there are. We had fuel prices increasing because of the Russian-Ukraine war, but despite that, India's airfare hike has been extremely high compared to the other countries as well. A report by the Airports Council International said that India's airfare hike is the highest in the Asia Pacific. So that really shows you the picture that India's airfares are a primary concern. But of course, today is a historic day for India's civil aviation as Indigo has signed that historic deal. Well, Vishnu Shom is joining us to break down these details of the Indigo deal and help us understand what will be the impact of this historic deal on India's aviation. Vishnu.
Well, it is absolutely incredible, isn't it? Indigo, after this deal, will have 1,000-odd aircraft on order, an Indian airline with 1,000-odd aircraft in order. This particular deal, 500 aircraft, these planes will be delivered between 2030 and 2035. But you can rest assured that in the period prior to that, there will be new aircraft which Indigo will be acquiring. These new aircraft are in fact already in order. So a bunch of new aircraft, hundreds coming into the Indigo fleet, and then eventually there'll be many more from 2030 to 2035. So how exactly is it all going to work out? Well, for starters, Indigo has a policy where they put firm orders for from aircraft manufacturers, which has always been Airbus in their case. And by doing that well in advance, they are assured delivery of aircraft. They follow a process where they buy aircraft, they lease aircraft, which are then sold back or returned to the lessor. That's a policy that's going to happen. So by the end of the day, it's not as if Indigo would necessarily be operating 1,000 aircraft plus. Many of the aircraft in its fleet right now will be returned. This has immense benefits, in fact, for consumers because they are always on brand new aircraft. But it also means that the Indian market is going to see two massive dominant players, particularly if Vistara does merge with Air India. Remember, it's the same company, but the Competition Commission of India needs to look very closely at how that process goes. One being Indigo, one being Air India. Air India just placed the largest order in aviation history till a couple of hours back when Indigo beat them by 30 aircraft or so. They had placed an order for 470 aircraft. At the end of the day, with so many aircraft on their books, these airlines need to ensure that these aircraft are filled with passengers. That's why they need to ensure that their fares work out, they are relatively cheap, because if these aircraft are not filled up, if they overprice their tickets, then it is not going to be viable for either Air India or Indigo to operate in the long run. But it's a massive day for Indian aviation. It reflects strength in the Indian economy, and so you've got this massive deal right now.
Right, Vishnu. Well, thanks very much for breaking down those details for us. And as you've mentioned, it's a record that has been broken by this deal. And while we talk about records being broken with these mega deals that are signed by Indian Airlines, what we also are focusing on in this show is that even when it comes to airfares, the sky is not the limit. And we'll show you data for that. Let's take a look at the figures. Well, since September 2022, when the government removed the cap on airfares that was imposed during the pandemic in 2020, airfares have been soaring, as you can see in that table that we are showing you. The one-way flight ticket from Delhi to Srinagar, if booked 7 days before your travel, has gotten 3 times more expensive in just a matter of 10 months. So the same amount of money that could get you a return ticket last year can now only get you a one-way ticket. In fact, the story remains the same across several other popular routes and not just Delhi to Srinagar. The prices are exorbitant even though the government has intervened, and prices are in fact falling after that. Well, Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia met airline representatives on the 5th of June and he asked them to self-regulate prices. What was the result? We have seen that after that, prices are in fact falling. Airfares across popular routes have fallen by around 15 to 20%. As you can see there, that Delhi to Mumbai, that price has fallen 32%, Delhi to Srinagar down 9%, Delhi to Pune down 36%. But even now, they are much higher compared to what the prices were a year ago in September last year, as we showed you. In fact, a report by the Airports Council International says that our airfare hike during the period 2019 to 22 period was the highest in the whole of Asia Pacific. So we'll now decode why India's airfares are rising so sharply. So for that, we have experts joining us on the broadcast who will help us understand and decode this entire problem and to understand what the solutions could be for this. We have Vinamra Longani, the head of operations at Sareen & Co. We also have Parvez Damania, the former director of Kingfisher Airlines and the founder of Damania Airways. He's an aviation expert who will be joining us in just a short while from now. And we also have Raghu Chaudhary, the founder and CEO of wowidays, which is a travel company, as he's also a member of the International Air Transport Association. So my first question to you, Vinamra. Well, the government has been saying that there are external factors at play. Even the ACI report said that fuel prices have gone up, and that's why we've seen airfares have gone up in India as well. But definitely the hike is high in India compared to other countries, right? Because the ACI report also said that our hike is the highest in Asia Pacific. So what are the reasons for this particularly high airfare hike in India?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. And apart from everything else that you've covered brilliantly, let me just bring to the fore a couple of other things. So you see, as it stands, we are currently in one of the two peak periods of travel in our country. You see, the summer holidays and of course, the run up to the winter holidays is when the vast majority of people are traveling in this country. So that is something to be borne in mind. The other thing to bear in mind is we have Indian Airlines altogether have as many as 100 aircraft grounded for various reasons. The primary reason for this being, aircraft that have been grounded due to the lack of replacement Pratt & Whitney engines. And, this includes aircraft that are operated by Indigo, the vast majority, and of course, a whole bunch of them that were operated by Go First. So when you see 100 aircraft, an aircraft on an average, if you were to look at just domestic sort of flying within India, carries out at least 4, if not 5 flights during the day. So you've lost 500 flights a day straight away there because 100 aircraft are out of operation. Secondly, and more importantly, one of our airlines is going through an insolvency process, so they're grounded. Now, to again put that into perspective for you, Go had about 53, 54 odd aircraft. Half of them were grounded because of this engine issue, but they still had about 20, 25 odd aircraft operating. So you've lost that capacity. And subsequently, now when you add the holiday season to the mix, we have a classic situation where there's not enough seats available, there's a dearth of supply, and everybody wants to travel, which is why we've seen airfares shoot up. Now, in my opinion, as the summer travel period ends, so from the first week of July, we will see fares fall because the July, August, September quarter is again one where a lot of people don't really travel. But this issue with higher airfares will surface again in the winters, in winter, because unless and until, this issue with all these engines these engines are replaced, which is highly unlikely. And, we have all these aircraft come back into service. So yes, we may well be here in 6 months, in December, talking about the same issue. And that's just unfortunately due to all these external factors.
So unfortunately, we might be talking about the same issue in winter vacation as well as we're talking about it in summer vacation. But while you mentioned that vacation airfare hike, we came across a very interesting metric that might be very surprising for many of our viewers, is that these days, you can book flights for certain international destinations for a lower price, for which you can get certain domestic airfare tickets. And we are just going to show you that across several locations like Delhi to Srinagar, Delhi to Mumbai, Delhi to Pune. We showed you that airfares are so high that the one-way fares 2 weeks before your travel for Srinagar to Guwahati is around 31,000. New Delhi to Kullu is around 24,000. Pune to Leh, 24,000. Delhi to Srinagar, 12,000. These are one-way tickets, not return tickets, ladies and gentlemen. And cut to certain popular international destinations that are comparable to those domestic prices. New Delhi, Brussels, 30,000. Bengaluru to Paris is 29,820. New Delhi to Dubai at around 11,000, while Mumbai to Maldives is just around 10,000. So those prices completely comparable. In fact, in some cases cheaper than how much you'll have to pay for certain domestic destinations. So if I can come to you, Raghu Chaudhary, on that, this just shows us that you can fly international at the price of domestic these days. That has become a reality. So what is the trend that you're seeing in airfares? Is it just because of the pandemic, that after the pandemic the demand really grew above possibly expectations, and that's why we're seeing this? Or in your career, what does it say? Have prices been increasing for the last decade or so? When did this really begin? And is it really concerning? Is it really unusual what we've seen in the last couple of years when it comes to airfares?
Yeah, rightly said, and what a fantastic analysis report you guys have shown. Actually, it's a really wonderful analysis. And rightly said, my colleague, my co-panelist Vinamra also said rightly. So post-pandemic, it's not only about the pandemic. It's not only the airlines, aviation. This thing affected entire as a human being. Entire world has suffered. Entire, be it is agriculture, be it is restaurant, F&B business, any kind of IT, every business is affected. But collectively, everybody has come up with a lot of solutions, actually. A lot of solutions and a lot of innovative ways. Everybody has come up with fantastic ideas. So coming to the aviation department, yes, there are certain problems. Actually, aviations have a huge payouts over there, whether it is ground handling or else fuel. Multiple things are there. But it's not that collectively, if you government and corporate companies and aviation airlines companies, you come collectively with some innovative ideas and some which is useful for the customers, passengers. So we can definitely come out of this situation, right? Only the thing is lack of initiative is definitely is there. Lack of initiative by either government to say or else companies to say, airline companies or corporates towards the passengers. We thought actually every customer, every passenger's dream actually to travel across post-pandemic. Everybody is actually, demand is more now. Because of pandemic, post-pandemic, everybody want to spend time to roam around the world. As rightly said, domestic flights have been compared to the international flights. Yes, you can travel to multiple international destinations compared to domestic. Only this season. Again, for this solution is always booking in advance, right? There are a lot of options in the market. There are a lot of companies which gives you, even if you are uncertainty also, if you book earlier 2 months, 3 months, if you if you cancel at last moment also, there is some insurance, 100%
right,
insurance, just paying 4%, 5% extra, like you will get that insurance, and the last moment also, if you cancel, you will get 100% refund. There are a lot of solutions if you see, even in that percepts also.
Right, and in fact, it's not the spot fares we're talking about. We're talking about these prices. Even if you make a booking a week in advance, these prices are this exorbitant. So, Parvez Davmania, I want to come to you next. Where are we really going wrong? Because when you talk of prices going up, any economist will tell you that there are only two reasons that could be at play: one supply, one demand. From the demand side, we are already seeing, and in fact we will just show you that the air travel passengers for the last few years have only been falling, and the passengers that we are seeing now in 2022, this is all data from the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Before the pandemic, per year we were seeing around 200 million air travel passengers. Now that has come down to around 105 million in the year 2022, almost half. So clearly, it doesn't look like a demand problem, at least from this picture. Clearly, people are not taking flights as much as they were taking flights in the year 2019, right before the pandemic, when it was around 204 million. So demand side aside, let's talk about the supply side now. We have seen Indigo buying so many 500 aircraft today. Then we saw Air India sign that deal a few months ago, in which they also bought more than 400 aircraft. So while we talk about demand definitely falling, but on the other side, the government also says that the sector is expanding. More and more airports have been created, more and more aircraft are operating. So if supply of aircraft is increasing, demand is not that much, then where really is the problem? How are prices increasing, Mr. Damania?
No, I think somewhere I don't agree with your figures. From last March, January to March 22 to 23, there has been a 36% jump in the demand. 36% growth has occurred.
But we are still much below the levels that we were at in 2019.
No, we have, I don't remember the 2019 figures, but we have far crossed the pandemic figures. With what we were before COVID, we far crossed that. Now, the other issue being, like one of your panelists said, Kuwait had about 60 aircrafts, maybe 40, 30 were flying. They, of course, decreased. Then, and about, I think, about 107 aircrafts were on ground. That is one of the reasons. Second thing, a lot of passengers that were going on Go Air or Book One are transferred to these airlines. Again, I will tell you something, even before, if you see the DGCA numbers, all airlines were doing 70s to 80% load factor. That's somewhere highest in the world. Now, with Go Air going out to circulation and the number of aircrafts on ground, the load factors must have jumped to the late 80s or early 90s. So with this kind of load factors, I think the upper bracket of the airlines is very high. I think the airlines should consider and remember that their growth has occurred due to the support of the consumer in India. The consumer is supported, that's why the growth has occurred. And that is why they should also be careful on the upper circuit. See, I think the KPMG report 2040 shows that the demand is going to keep going up and up. India is the fastest growing aviation market in the world. In the past, we have shown 16-17% growth. And I'll tell you something, even companies like Airbus now are completely dependent on the orders from India. Today, the 500 aircraft order for a single aisle aircraft is the largest ever.
Right.
Air India may have ordered larger number of aircrafts as value-based, but nobody has ordered these many single aisle aircrafts at one time.
All right,
I'm sure Indigo's done their homework and they've studied the market and placed this order. So I think the demand is going to keep on going up. The growth is going to keep on going on. But I just hope the airlines will be slightly more considerate in looking at the upper bracket of fares so that time doesn't become unaffordable. Right,
and in fact, we'll come to the solutions. But before that, Vinamra, are we looking at a duopoly here? Because first you had Air India with that historic deal. Now that historic deal has been crossed by another historic deal by Indigo. So are we looking at a duopoly? Indigo holds more than half of the market share, then the remaining part of the majority is with Air India, then SpiceJet. So is the market sort of skewed, and is that a risk that you're seeing?
Well, not necessarily. We've still got players like Akasa. They ordered 72 aircraft. They've inducted as many as 19 in a short span of a year. And, you know, there are other deliveries planned. So I won't agree with you to the extent that we have a duopoly already. But yes, it does seem that, you know, we have one large low-cost airline. And then even within the Air India group, you see, you've got two low-cost airlines that are being merged into one, and then there's going to be a full-service airline. So won't really agree to it being a duopoly. And may I just please circle back to what Mr. Damania was saying. You see, I don't want to be the devil's advocate here, but historically, India is known to have the cheapest airfares in the world. So, and while these couple of months is when we've seen airfares rise, historically our airlines have lost money. And barring Indigo, who's consistently been profitable pre-COVID, most of our airlines have lost money. We've had a huge number of airline bankruptcies, so much so that we've lost Jet, and that hasn't come back yet. And we have another airline who's going through the bankruptcy process just because of the challenges of operating in a market like this.
Right.
So you see, one has to, while it's great to look at it from a consumer's standpoint and say, well, you may be paying more, and that includes all of us sitting here. I travel a lot for work and otherwise, and yes, we're all paying a pretty penny. But the cost of operating in a market like this, we have some of the highest costs in the world, and also to bear in mind that there are crests and troughs. So, while there are these ridiculously high airfares right now, come next month, we'll be back to seeing deals in the market because, well, people won't be traveling as much.
Well, we're all hoping for that. But when we talk of solutions, Mr. Damania, as Mr. Longani also mentioned, that these are airlines trying to recover their losses that they made during the pandemic, and naturally any company would do that. So then what's the solution in such a scenario? We've seen the government intervening, and after that prices have in fact fallen by 10 to 15%, and in fact even more than that. But despite that, they're much higher compared to what they were a year ago. So what is a long-term solution for this?
I agree they were much higher than what they were before. But some of the fares have become ridiculously high. I think what is required, the airlines have to self-govern themselves. Let us not take advantage of a situation of the consumer. The consumer is, like I said before, the consumer has supported you, and that is why the growth has occurred. I think the solution is very simple. More airlines should come in, more aircrafts will come in, and there will be a certain stage where it will be balanced out. Right? Also, it's quite ridiculous if you see fares going to Delhi are not very expensive. Fares coming from Delhi to Bombay are very expensive. For some reason, fares out of Delhi have become very unaffordable. So I think airlines have lost
sorry
money.
to interrupt you, but is self-regulation going to help? Because till now we relied on that. Then the government intervened. Then we saw some prices falling. So is there more government intervention
I think
needed?
government has not intervened the way they intervened during the COVID times, where they put a specific cap on the lower fares and the upper fares. Here the government just given a suggestion, and I hope the airlines are followed, or it is self-regulated. I do not know. But I think it's a free market economy. The airlines should be allowed to make their decisions. But again, like I said, if they're self-regulated, be more reasonable. Because see, not everybody's traveling on business. There are people who are traveling because of medical reasons, schools, exams, debts, emergencies, weddings. So sometimes it will become completely unaffordable for somebody who has to come from Guwahati to Bombay or from Guwahati to Delhi. It would become completely unaffordable. That's why I think the airline... See, right now, we are leading to a very dangerous trend.
Right.
Ultimately, I don't know how strong Spice will be in the long run, how much impact Akasa will make in the entire market. But we are going to go to a situation where there will be the Tata Group with Air India and the Indigo.
Right.
And
so
then
self-regulation is what you're saying is the sustainable solution to this. And I would like to give you the last word, Raghu Chaudhary, that while Mr. Damania also mentioned that for some routes, going and coming back tickets, they have a huge variety as well. So last question is only for our consumers and for our viewers' interests. Do you have any tips for how in advance should people book flights to get the best prices, because it's holiday season, and I'm sure most of us have those questions on our minds?
Exactly, like other countries, like US said, other countries, consumers always to book more than 6 months, 1 year earlier, and they book always along with the insurance. Now, for example, I'll say 15 days prior to booking, the flight ticket is somewhere 30,000, you say, as rightly said by you. And the same flight ticket will cost not more than 10,000 if you book 3 months earlier. Okay, I understood that the consumer is not uncertainty. They may cancel that. Maybe they are worried about cancellation charges. For that only, in the market, in every website and every travel company has come up with a beautiful, like the plans. Like if you cancel even last time also, just you need to pay just for the 4 or 5% of the cost. Earlier, if you're booking 10,000 ticket, you may just paying 300 rupees more. So for that, if you cancel the last moment also for a variety of the reasons, you will get 100% refundable. Right? Paying 300 is good than paying 30,000 at last moment. Right? These are the very simple this thing. Always we suggest to book earlier. Then you will get early bird offers, whether it is flights or in other things as the consumer part, as the tourist or as the business travel. So that is the most thing as a consumer point I can give a best tip actually.
Right.
And other aspect, like you say, the government also, as rightly said by Mr. Damania, then government should come with a lot of kind of incentives. The monopoly is always play a big role in this thing.
Right.
So keeping like competition is always a good idea. The government should come with the new players and give a new incentives or support to the new players and subsidies. These all things, the good initiatives towards whatever the Mr. Prime Minister said rightly, within 5,000 rupees people can travel with Hawaii Chapel also. That implies definitely these all initiatives required. Right.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us with your insights. And of course, as you mentioned, as an ending note, the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that he wants to see people with Hawaii chappals traveling in Hawaii jahaz, traveling in aeroplanes. And we hope that that becomes a reality very soon. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. We are seeing airfares are exorbitant. And we hope that today's discussion and bringing to light this topic acts as a wake-up call for airlines, because experts, as you heard, pointing out that self-regulation is the only solution that seems to be the case right now, and only airlines regulating their own prices can bring some relief to consumers. Thanks very much for watching. That's a wrap from me on Breaking News Tonight. Goodbye.